Hey guys, well, it's Saturday and I should be fishing, but we've got 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts and it's cloudy out on our carp flats. So instead of fishing, I've been going through some old footage, making some more videos because I think they're cool. And if I can't fish, I like to watch fishing videos. So anyway, it's kind of a cool video. Just wanted to kind of walk you through what's going on here. I spotted this fish. Probably about 100 yards away when I originally spot it, and I went and I set my camera up. It's not something I do very often, but I set the camera up, and then I went and tried to make a sneak into this fish. So I'm sneaking down the bank right now, waiting for him to come into a good area. And you'll see here in just a second, I make a cast, and the cast is right on the nose of the fish. Or maybe not the nose, but 6 to 8 inches in front of the fish. It's pretty close. And I've had a couple people ask me with carp fly fishing, can you get away with casting right at the fish? And the answer is yes and no. I typically fish with very light flies. Almost all of the flies I tie have mono eyes, or I use what are called faux pearls, which are just basically little plastic balls. It's just like a bead chain, but they're plastic, so they're lighter. They're not going to put a lot more weight on the fly. And then I also tie a wing onto almost all of my flies. And the reason I do that is it increases the wind resistance a little bit. So as that fly is dropping towards the water, it actually slows it down a little bit. Makes it slightly harder to cast, but if we're using a 7-weight rod, which is what I typically use, I've got more power than I need to drive a fly with a little wing, even in windy conditions. So having a little bit more wind resistance actually helps me drop the fly in there a little bit more softly. It helps the fly land softly. And while carp are super sensitive, as you can see, this fish, as he's moving around, he's making a pretty good disturbance in the water himself. So if we don't make a disturbance bigger than this disturbance he's making, a lot of times you can get that fly extremely close to the fish. And you'll notice this fish too is right at the surface. So he is making a little bit more disturbance than a fish that might be just below the surface is, right? Because as he's moving through the water, he's busting up the surface tension of the water. He's making ripples. He's doing things like that actually can provide a little bit of cover for my cast. So you'll see it right here is when the cast comes in and lands, and you can just barely see where it hits. He immediately hits the fly. I set the hook, and we're on. So you can absolutely cast directly to a carp. However, the situation has to be correct for that. Most of the time, you're going to want to use the drag and drop technique. Now, the drag and drop technique, as I've talked about in some of my other videos, is where we cast the fly slightly past where the fish is, and then we pull it into what we call the dinner plate. And the dinner plate is a roughly 1 foot area around the head of the carp, and let the fly flutter down in there. Now, again, the reason that I use very light flies is because the longer that is suspended in the air coming in, or in the water, not in the air, the longer that fly is suspended in the water in front of the carp, the more chance we have of actually seeing the carp attack and eat that fly. Now, carp will eat off the bottom a lot, obviously. Most carp flies are designed to sit on the bottom and then kick the back end up, preventing something that the carp will eat. But, one, it's harder to see them actually eat it when it's sitting on the bottom. And two, it's more fun to watch them attack a fly and eat it. So my preference is light flies. Again, I almost always use either mono eyes or faux pearl eyes and a wing on all of my flies, and that is to make them lighter but still flip them over so that the hook up, and then it will flutter down in front of the fish slower in the water column than if I was to put dumbbell eyes, lead eyes, or even bead chain eyes on them. I do sometimes also use blind. In bone fishing, we sometimes call it like a blind gotcha. And a gotcha is a bonefish pattern where we don't put any eyes on it, and the wing and the way it's designed, it'll still flip over in the water. I do sometimes use blind, a blind version of like the carp maul. But I don't know. I don't know. Only if they're really, really picky, if they're or they're extremely spooky, to the point where virtually any cast anywhere near them is causing them to spook. Then I'll sometimes go to a blind fly to have it land even softer. Problem with blind flies sometimes is they won't even sink right away. They'll sit on the surface kind of like a dry fly, and you have to pull them just a little bit to get them to drop. So I don't know. I prefer the dumbbell eyes. I like also that the dumbbell eyes, or not the dumbbell eyes, but the faux pearl or mono eyes, they give it a platform for that fly to land on when it hits the bottom. So when you do move it along the bottom, it kind of holds the rest of the fly off of the bottom just a little bit, so it moves a little bit better. So to me, using mono eyes or faux pearl eyes are your two best options. And then I always tie a wing on my carp flies. Again, that's to help it turn over and to create some more wind resistance, air resistance, so that fly will land a little bit softer, especially using something like a 7-weight, where we're going to create more line speed than we would with like a 5 or a 6-weight. And, when you hook into a 20-pound fish and you have a 5-weight or a 4-weight, it's certainly doable, but it can be pretty miserable trying to actually finish getting that carp into the net. The last couple feet to get a carp in can be brutal on a strong carp, and you can spend 15 minutes just trying to finish off the carp. So anyway, that's just a cool video I thought I'd make and talk about some of the things since it's windy and crappy on the flats today.